All right, what's happening, fam? LAR movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and CreateSpace. A link will be in the description box below. As usual, this video is entitled The Mental Health or Mental Illness Hypocrisy. You know, every time they have these shootings, people like to say mental illness and mental health. And there's this conversation that keeps being had that you're doing a disservice to people who actually have mental illness, you know, and mental problems. And here's the thing. The reason I want to talk about this is because some of the major things that we talk about with mental illness is depression, anxiety, bipolar, dementia, not so much. ADD is actually a part of mental health. Schizophrenia, OCD, autism, and post-traumatic stress. Now, I could take some of these out, but I'm going to address a little bit one by one. Clinical depression. See, a lot of these things, we as a society either make fun of people when they're going through these things, or we're dismissive and we leave people hanging. But and these things don't necessarily cause people to lash out and kill other people. But let's see, schizophrenia and bipolar, that can be a violent sign of mental illness. But most people who are schizophrenic or bipolar or even manic depressants either are medicated or self-medicated, and it's known that they have these problems. It's well known and well documented, right? So I'm going to take them out of this because a lot of times a person with schizophrenia who's bipolar, or maybe even manic depressant, is really not allowed to get firearms. They find, you off. That's they going to act that like. But people who are depressed, people who are clinically depressed, because they're depressed and they're always down, they wind up being isolated by themselves because nobody wants that bad energy around them all the time, because it's hard to get a depressed person out of depression. But depressed people normally kill themselves. So they're able to get guns. You know, what they normally do is turn the guns on themselves. So you're doing a disservice to say a person who goes out and murders a bunch of people is mentally ill because they're depressed. Because we don't say these people are schizophrenics or bipolar or even manic depressants. So let's scratch those off the table and let's get to clinical depression. They're not considered clinically depressed. They're just people who lashing out at society. Now, anxiety. People who are anxious are not looked at as a type of person who will go out of their way to harm other people. You know, they're procrastinators, overthinkers, people who are scared of interactions. For the most part, you know, they're the type of person who can't really talk to somebody because they're thinking the whole thing in their head and they freaking out. Those are the type of people that you normally see who have to smoke or drink before they do anything because they have to calm themselves down because they're in their own head so much. So to say that that's the type of person that you're mentally ill, this person's mentally ill because they're shooting up people. A person who's anxious ain't really, the plan just makes them overly anxious. They're worry warts. They're worried about more than they are the type of people who will go out and just do something to somebody. So to me, that's off the table. You know what I'm saying? A person with ADD, since stipulation with ADD is you don't really stick to things. You know, you're moving from one thing to the other and you never finish anything. And you're hyperactive and you're impulsive. The impulsive part could work into a shooter, but they're not going to follow through with the plan if you got ADD. Like, it's hard to have ADD and follow through with stuff. And speaking from a person who, yeah. But the way you curve that is with diet and actual structure, or things that make you have a structure. Sports, chess, music, which martial arts, stuff like that. But you're not gonna go out there and go out there and harm another person, because you're gonna be mad, but you got ADD. I'm gonna beat your ass. All right, what we doing again? So are these shooters? Do they have ADD and they just see their plans through? Makes no sense. Now, they are on BGS talked about a lot of these shooters being on psychotropic drugs. So the medication might get you. I will say that. But just blaming it on depression or mental illness, I don't think so. ADD is synonymous with psychotropic drugs. Yeah, you see me right now, right? I skipped over a person with schizophrenia because, like I said, we already know how that works. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, a mental illness. And I'm just using, the top of the list, basically. You got OCD. You really gonna plan a mass shooting? No. I mean, you're gonna be too busy being, obsessive compulsive about the whole plan and going over it and doing this and doing that. You're not gonna be able to do all that. It's a little too messy for OCD. And when people think about OCD, a lot of times they think about neat freaks. So, are you gonna profile a mass shooter as a person with OCD? I think not. When you talk about autism, autism can be used as a part excuse, because when you're autistic, you don't really interact well with people. But you're not a harm to other people. You don't harm other people. You're more of a harm to yourself, just like somebody who has Asperger's or something like that. You're just not. You're not. You're not that social because you're socially awkward. So that's a problem. Very, very much so a problem. And people, like I said, people, for the most part, nobody's gonna consider a mass shooter as autistic. Autism sometimes is more linked to people with very, very high intelligence. So they are fixated on certain things, mathematics, science, architecture, art, stuff like that. So mass shooting ain't really, no, it's not in their thing, in their makeup. And the other mental illnesses, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you got PTSD, now for soldiers, it makes sense, but a lot of these mass shooters ain't soldiers. And a lot of these mass shooters don't come from traumatic situations or stressful environments. They haven't been exposed to a lot of trauma or a lot of stress. So are you going to lump these mass shooters in with people who came back from war or dealing with what you would consider high level trauma or stress? Like, I don't know, a kid who's been raped or beaten and on a regular basis. Not, I know rape is traumatic. Don't get me twisted. Getting beat is traumatic. Don't get me twisted. But somebody who's who it's become a routine, or who had a period where it was routine in their lives. Because these people that you're saying are mentally ill, they don't have these experiences. They don't have trauma-filled backgrounds, because y'all keep calling these people all American boys. Everything look fine. So you can't say it's trauma in their life. You can't say it's stress in their life. So to give them this mental illness thing is crazy. And you know, and look at the way we treat our soldiers who return from war, because they got a high suicide rate. Nobody cares. So when you don't care about the highest demographic of sufferers from PTSD, when they come home, all of a sudden a kid who hasn't even been nowhere near that type of situation, or a grown man who hasn't been nowhere near that type of stress or trauma, just gets mad one day and hauls off and shoots people. And now all of a sudden they're mentally ill. That's a disservice to people who actually suffer from that. So it's just my 2 cents of saying this is why it's a mental illness hypocrisy when people bring that up, because you're doing a disservice to people who actually have mental illnesses, because they don't do this type of stuff. So we out.